Um, we're going to record today's session. Hopefully the snow days went okay for you. Sounds like most of you guys are back in school today. I heard there's going to be some snow tomorrow, so we'll see what happens there. We're uh, we're in our 7 steps to a language-rich interactive classroom book study. This is going to be step 5. Um, we're going to go over a learning objective and then kind of review our first couple steps and then talk about step 5, which is all about using visuals and having some strategies for teaching vocabulary. Today's learning objective, we can create a plan to implement strategies from the 7 steps to a language rich interactive classroom uh, in our school. Um, the exit ticket by the end of today, we're hoping you could finish this sentence that my next step to implementing language rich strategies is blank. I mean, just real quick, I like to read an objective out loud to my students. I like to kind of have them echo read it with me. Sometimes I like to annotate the objective, point out different words, and ask students what they mean. So I might say, ooh, implement. Implement's kind of a tricky word. What does it mean to implement something? And then, maybe a student says, oh, to put something into place or to start something up or something like that. And so I would kind of write on in more everyday kid friendly language, what does this word mean? Um, so again, kind of reading it aloud, echo reading with students, annotating my objectives so kids are clear about what we're about to start. Um, all right. I know I reviewed steps 1 through 3 before doing step 4. Again, I'm going to go through steps 1 through 4. I'm going to go quite a bit quicker this time, but just to remind everyone of how this has kind of been progressing. Um, all right, first step is teaching students what to say when they don't know what to say. Essentially involves creating a poster with some talk moves or things that you're comfortable having students tell you if they're ever being asked to share in class and they're confused or they're not sure of the answer or they're hesitating. Basically, hey, do you need to talk to a friend or a partner for some help? Do you need some more time to think? Do you want me to repeat the question or rephrase the question? Do you need help finding that information? Um, Mostly, um, the step just involves creating this poster. So it might be that you pre create the poster, it might be that you create it with your students as you go over it, but it should be really clearly, explicitly shared with students about these are the different things I'd love for you to say in class if you're ever not feeling like you're ready to share out whole group. And I would say them. I'd have my kids repeat after them, and then throughout the day during instruction, in situations where kids feel confused, kind of say, hey, if you want to tell me something and sort of advocate for yourself or ask for a little support, um, try that out. Um, so that's step 1. Hopefully, everyone's got that in place. Step 2 is we're encouraging our students to use complete sentence responses. Um, and we do this for a variety of reasons. We kind of want to start to train our brains to sort of think in complete thoughts. We want to give kids sort of an idea of how do we use different vocabulary words in context or how do we fit words into sentences. We also recognize that the more we're able to verbally express our thoughts and ideas in complete sentences, the more likely or the easier it will be for our students to be able to write in complete sentences. Um, Also, just have heard feedback from teachers that sometimes it's nice that students start to understand what do I mean by a complete sentence, and they've been exposed to different sentence frames that have given them ideas of what does a complete sentence consist of, and what are different examples of ways to put together a complete sentence. Um, so to do this, three big ways to do this. One, we're going to have providing opportunities for our students to talk to each other. So opportunity for them to use a complete sentence. We're going to give them sentence frames, sentence starters, sentence frames, sort of help them to figure out what does that sound like? How can I do that? And then step three is coaching for it. And so I think I shared this last time, but um, mostly, if you have a student who shares maybe a one word answer or a fragment of a sentence, you want to really coach them up. And I would say first, validating like, hey, you're right on the right track. I can tell you understand that. Um, and then saying, hey, the only thing that would be better is if you could do that in a complete sentence. So really asking, either asking the student themselves, can you give me that answer in a complete sentence? Or putting it back on the class and maybe asking, say, hey, Cami was really close there. She really had a piece of that answer. I think she might need some help in putting that in a complete sentence. Is there someone want to help rephrase what Cami said and put that in a complete sentence for us? So kind of coaching involving validating, hey, I can tell you're listening. I can tell you're onto something. And then encouraging, let's hear it one more time and try to use our complete sentence response. Step three is randomizing and rotating. So then we're going to get, mostly what we need here is some type of system for randomization. So maybe we're going to have popsicle sticks. That's a pretty popular one with students' names on them. You might do some type of electronic wheel. I think wheelofnames.com maybe is the website that Cami shared with you a few sessions ago. In the book, they talk about having students' names on different index cards. So you kind of would just draw a card out and use that as randomization. Doesn't really matter what your system is. You just want a system in place. And then I like that the book says, this kind of creates this positive tension where students are attentive to what the question is. They're about ready to hear. Is it going to be me who needs to share out? Am I ready for this? And I think maybe some of you might be able to share that your students have responded, kind of perking up when it's time to do a random call out. All right, so that would be randomization. I think what we're really trying to do here is more times than not have this sort of sequence. So I'm asking a question to my class. I'm going to give them some think time. So we talked about step 4 being a ready response. And then, Cami, will you tell about the ideal sequence? I have my son here interrupting me, even though I tried to encourage him not to interrupt me. So,
Sure. So, yes, we want to make sure we give them plenty of prompt time and give us that signal when they're ready. And what I like about that, especially, is if you have those students that are always shouting out answers, it kind of reins them in so that they know they can't be shouting out. We're waiting for everyone to give an answer and give us that signal that they're ready to give an answer. And then after everyone has given the signal, go ahead, Rob.
all right, I'm sorry.
Problem?
My son's here, my wife's not home, and I tried to set him up with a tablet, hoping that he would let me just do my thing. All right. I don't know where we are. Mostly,
Discuss
giving
the
a little,
response.
all right, a little think time to share your answer with a peer, and then knowing that the next step is randomization and someone from the class should share out. And again, this all kind of is a little bit of a cycle. If I do a randomization and a student's not ready, then I'm asking them to go back to step 1. Is there something you could tell me? Do you need more time with a partner? Do you need more time to think? Um, I think the book talks about sometimes skipping the partner talk. I would say do the partner talk, but if you find that kids are over reliant with leaning on what their partner says, or not thinking for themselves, then maybe every so often mix it up and skip the partner talk. All right. Then our last meeting, we talked about step 4, which was using a total response signal. This is either to indicate that they're ready to respond to the question, or they're finished and they're ready to move on to the next step. And it's just preparing them for participation in a non-threatening way. We talked about a lot of different kinds of these. The one we're really looking for is this ready response. I think the other ones are great, and you should certainly try them out. But I think at minimum, you really want to build in this wait time, especially for our multilingual learners who we're thinking are maybe needing extra time to process or think about what was the question or what is my answer and how might I say that in English. So kind of building in a little bit of extra processing time and doing that with a ready response. So saying, hey guys, I'm not looking for hands up on this question. Instead, when you think you have an answer, I want you to give me a thumbs up, or I want you to cross your arms, or do the thinker's chin, or something like that. So saying, I'm not going to call on students. I'm just looking for a signal that you're ready to respond. Um, other ways of doing this, a written response would be like a whiteboard slate where you're kind of jotting down your answer and then maybe flashing it to the teacher or to a partner to share it. Making choices could be different colored index cards, and there's different choices on the board or on a slide deck that kids are choosing from, sort of like a multiple choice sort of thing. Ranking, we talked about fist to five. So you might give a statement and have kids respond. Five, I totally agree with that statement. Three, I partially agree. Zero, I definitely do not agree with that statement. So those are different types of total participation responses. Um, all right. I oh yeah, and then just to kind of say it again, we're really looking for this ready response in particular, so that the process again is giving students a little bit of time to think about the question, asking them to show me a response when they're ready to answer. At that point, I'm going to encourage them to use a complete sentence before they then share with their partner. So we might remind them about a sentence starter, then turning to their partner to share out, and then knowing that the next step would be maybe a randomization to share out as well.
Hey
Um,
Rob, I thought of something that happened in a classroom. I talked earlier this morning about how some students are always got their hands up first and want to be called on.
yeah.
And I remember one time I told the student, we want to give everyone an opportunity to talk, so I need that signal. And the boy told me, she doesn't ever know the answer anyway. So what I did was I asked the question in Spanish
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't speak Spanish, so he couldn't answer, but she had her thumb up right away and knew
Neat,
the
neat.
answer. So
Yeah.
sometimes just switching it up that way a little bit so that they know everybody deserves time to think and everybody deserves time to respond. And just because they don't speak English doesn't mean they can't give the answers. They just need more time to think about it.
I
So
like
that
that
was
story.
kind of an eye opener for me and for that student. So
Mm-hmm.
just a kind of a cool
No,
idea.
that's great. That's great. That's a great story. Um, all right. All right, I'm going to run you through sort of a way to share out about this a little bit. Mostly what I'm going to do is a structure called Q Triple SA, which is kind of spoiling the book because it's coming up in one of our chapters soon. But it's mostly putting all these things into place. And so we're going to try sort of a virtual Q Triple SA. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about which of these four steps have you implemented and maybe have something to share about? So it could be maybe you've created the poster about teaching kids what to say when they don't know what to say. Maybe it's something about encouraging your students to use complete sentences, or you've been using sentence frames more. Maybe you've been doing a little bit more randomization and you want to share about how your kids have responded to that. Or maybe you've been doing some total response signals. And so mostly like it could be that you want to share, hey, this is something I really want to start implementing. I haven't quite done it yet. Or it could be this is something I put in place and I've seen a good result, or my kids have responded well to it. Or you might even share like, hey, I tried this and it really kind of fell flat and I'm not sure why. So whatever you want to share about it, but try to pick one of the four that you have something to say about. And when you think you know what you want to share, our signal is you're going to type in the chat the word ready. All right, we got some readies. Cool. Um, all right. So QSSA is an acronym. We do a question. We ask students to show us a signal when they have something they're going to say. Our next part is going to be a STEM. Um, I Cami, I think I'm gonna try breakout rooms, but I haven't done this in a long time. Is it gonna mess with our recording? Would you rather I didn't do breakout rooms?
I can pause it if we want to do that. Let me see if I can get it to where, let's see if I can get it set up for us.
I
Uh,
think I know how to do it. I mean,
I got it.
okay.
How many breakout rooms do we need? Let's see
How
here.
many we have? Uh make like 11.
11. So
Yeah,
maybe
do
five,
two.
or do you want three in a room?
No, do like 10, so there's like two or three in each room. There's 24 in here.
One, two, three, four, 10, 11, 12, 13,
It says 24.
24. Okay. Yeah. You want
Do,
10?
do 10 and there'll be
Okay.
two or three in each room. Um, all right. For students, I would encourage you to have them write out the complete sentence. Uh, or at least you're rehearsing, hey, you're about to use a complete sentence with a partner. This is an example of a sentence frame you might use. So you might say, the step of randomization has led to more of my students being ready to participate at the end of when I'm asking a question or something like that, right? Or has led to me hearing from some different students that I haven't been hearing from as often. Um, so that's how I might put together a sentence. If you want to use your own complete sentence, if this sentence frame doesn't work for what you want to share, you're welcome to create your own sentence. But I just want to encourage you to use a complete sentence when you're sharing with your partner. And then our assess is I'm going to do a randomization and just kind of cold call one of you guys. So you can either share your sentence or your partner's sentence if you feel better about that. All right. So our next
Ready?
step is share. For students, you might even give them a prompt about who shares first. So shortest hair shares first, or someone with I don't know, whatever it might be, someone with jewelry on shares first. All right, yeah, Cami, give us breakout rooms, and we're gonna share with a partner.
Okay. They are ready. So if you click on breakout rooms, you should be able to go there.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Let me pause. And we're back.
Great. Wait till everyone gets back, and then I'll share again. Julie, did you end up in a room?
Yes,
Good.
She was
I
with me.
did. I
Oh
was
yeah.
with
She
Leah.
Good.
Yeah, we
Good.
were
yeah,
really having a
sorry, I
great.
know that I cut you off. Sorry. I was like, what's
That's
this
okay.
button?
I
And I
really
pushed
enjoyed.
it.
Not
I
bad.
enjoyed hearing about your preschoolers and what you're doing is
Thank
amazing. She
you.
was sharing
Thank you.
about using more complete sentences.
Yeah.
Um, and we were discussing how even some of the nonverbal kids are hearing from their peers those complete sentences. So, it's got the languages start developing more
Neat.
quickly with all of that oral language
Awesome.
in a classroom. It's amazing.
Cool. I'm gonna do a little randomization. I'm gonna just say, Cami, give me a number. And
4.
all right, I'm gonna start for myself. I'm gonna count four squares down for myself. One, two, three, four. Stephanie Spalasa. Stephanie Spalasa.
Hello,
Thank
that is
you.
me.
All right.
when
Well,
I go
you,
get back in the laundry room again, so my kids
yeah.
aren't.
See,
Uh,
you're like me. I got my kid in the other room
I
too.
know, right? I always sympathize when I see that happen. I'm like,
Uh,
oh, all right.
just read us a sentence. What's one of the steps that you've implemented, and what is it? What's come of it?
So we talked a lot about randomization and how we're definitely using that. I'm a first grade teacher. My partner was a fifth grade teacher. That's going really well. But we both kind of started talking about the complete sentences and how that's very habitual when we are doing like a word problem or answering something from a like answering a uh, something after we're done reading and we're looking for an answer with that. But it's kind of hard because we often want to cut to the chase and like, okay, just say the answer so we can move on. And so I guess we're kind of having trouble finding a balance in like when and how often we should be asking for people to speak in complete sentences.
Okay, good, good. I like that the randomization is going well. I think again for anyone out there, like it sounds scary. It feels, the randomization feels scary rolling it out, and my kids are going to be nervous. But I think like giving them a instant success, doing using the poster and say, oh, if you're not ready, no problem, we can use the poster. And then as soon as you start getting past a couple kids getting a success with that, it becomes less scary. As far as like when to do complete sentences, uh, I mean, look, mostly the book would say if the teacher is asking a direct question to a student, you want the complete sentence response coming back. But any kind of follow-up question from like, oh, is that why do you think that or something? The follow-up might just be a partial answer or something. Or
Okay.
so as we continue the discussion, it doesn't have to be all complete sentences, but just trying to get that first response to be a complete sentence.
Or the sentence that uses the key words that you want to emphasize. So if it's something that's key to what you're teaching, you might continue to use that as a complete sentence too.
And I think it's brilliant. I love the thought of like enriching their language by using that. It's just it's not natural for me yet. And so that's something that I personally am just struggling with that I need to continue to practice because it's not coming as like I said, there's certain times in the day when it comes very natural, and then there's other times where I'm like, oh yeah, we're just giving really quick answers. So
Yeah, yeah. I've heard of like, kids reminding each other, like, no, it has to be a complete sentence. All right, I'm going to share and we're going to move on to the new content for today. Um, again, that was sort of our Q triple SA. So a question, a signal, a stem, a share, and then our assess was a randomization. Um, all right. Step 5, new stuff for today. Using lots of visuals, making sure we're using visuals all the time, and then being intentional about teaching some vocabulary, having a routine, and really having some strategies for teaching vocabulary. So mostly most teachers who've even had minimal sort of training on supporting multilingual learners would say it's important to use lots of visuals, and that's a go-to good support, good thing. I mean, I'm happy that most teachers could name that as one beneficial thing to do for multilingual learners because it's super important and it's really really helpful. And I just think so many times in my career as a teacher, I've heard things and thought like maybe that would be helpful. Maybe I should do that. I might think about doing that. But if you've ever put yourself in the position of being immersed in another language and trying to understand and how helpful it was if there was maybe some visual aids, it's kind of eye opening, just like how much I really depended on there being a visual to give me a clue as to what we're talking about. So if you're not already putting visuals all over the place, now's the time to start getting that going, and we'll share some resources on how to do that. So the book talks about using photos or maps or drawings or multimedia like movie clips or bringing in actual objects or concrete objects, or sometimes in EL we call it realia, just to get this sort of non-linguistic representation of the concept or the word that we're trying to teach. Um, my son is really upset about some tablet thing. He's crying in my ear over there. All right. I'm gonna try to ignore it for a minute. Uh, the visual non-glossary. All right, so this is just a bunch of stuff for you to check out. Mostly visual non-glossary is an example of it is this image on the right. It comes from a company called Seidlitz Education, which is the publisher of this book, of the Seven Steps book. And the guy who put it together is a guy named Stephen Fleener. He's big into science instruction. A lot of the vocabulary has to do with science vocabulary. Um, and he talks about the difference between like what he calls a structured visual versus like an unstructured visual. And in a webinar I attended once, he kind of talked about like, if I have the word photosynthesis, I could just use a picture of a plant and have the word photosynthesis above it. But if I were to use an image that really shows the sunlight coming down to the plant and then the plant releasing carbon dioxide or oxide, taking in the, I don't, I did not study up on my photosynthesis before giving this little spiel. Anyway, it might show the actual diagram of what's going on. Oh, something's coming into the plant and then something's coming out of the plant. And so then if I have a visual like that, even if I've never heard of this word photosynthesis, I might have something to say about it just by looking at that visual. So basically saying that some visuals can really help kids understand what is this concept or what is this word versus sometimes a visual is not great. I would say overall, no visual. We always want a visual. Sometimes you might get a visual that isn't perfect, and we can talk about that a little bit. But if you're able to, finding these what he would call structured visuals that really you can kind of make sense of a concept even if you haven't gotten instruction on it. So for example, we have body coverings. I have kind of a blown up image of the scales, of the fur, of the feathers. And so I'm like, oh, it's like the skin of the different animals or something, right? So that would be a structured visual. So check out Visual Non-Glossary. There's lots of free samples. I use a site called Flat Icon a lot just for putting a little bit more images on my slide decks. So for example, all of these were icons from Flat Icon. Flat Icon is mostly free. They're kind of wanting subscription a little bit more, but you can mostly get a lot of images for free. Noun Project is similar, but definitely wants kind of a subscription thing. Pixabay, Getty Images, things like that have lots of, I think there's one called like something Splash. I forgot what it was. Something Splash. Someone knows.
Upsplash.
What is it? Upsplash?
Upsplash, yes.
Upsplash. It's all visuals things like you don't need copyright for, basically, or you don't need to show where you got the image from, I guess. Or at least it's better to be used. I don't know. People won't get upset if you stole their image.
And most of the ones at the bottom of the list are Creative Commons, so they're copyright free and you're free to use them at liberty without having any worries about copyright issues.
Yeah, because, I mean, to be honest, for a long time, I just used Google Images. If you're still doing that, I'm not mad at you for doing that, but a lot of what I was doing was stealing images without permission of the person. So not always a great practice. Just wanted to tell me he had to go to the bathroom. That's great. All right, math vocabulary. All right, math vocabulary word calls. Julie Antill, who's a Mel consultant in Southeast Missouri, shared this. It's from Department of Education in Virginia, and they have a whole bunch of word wall cards for math. So you might say like, oh, fifth grade, and then kind of get into, like an image for a mixed number, even and odd numbers, least common multiples. So kind of has some ready-made sort of word wall cards that you might want to use. So these are all just ideas of ways to get some images. So definitely check those out. Step 5 talks a lot about using graphic organizers. You can use graphic organizers before instruction, during instruction, after instruction. I don't know how much it says in the book, but kind of discussing it with teachers, sometimes you want, depending on what you're asking students to do, you might have like a go-to graphic organizer. So anytime we're going to be comparing and contrasting, maybe we're using the Venn diagram or something. If we're doing a cause and effect, maybe there's a particular graphic organizer we use when we do cause and effect. When we're just doing sequencing of steps, maybe there's a particular graphic organizer. So you might pick like 4 or 5 that are sort of common things or tasks you're asking your students to do, and that way they get used to filling those out, right? So best practice would be anytime you're rolling out a graphic organizer, you're using a document camera, you're kind of modeling how would I complete this graphic organizer if I were the student. But the more you can use the same graphic organizers, the more students are going to catch on and be able to use that independently as a tool. So, I mean, I feel like lots of curriculum resources have different graphic organizers. But if you're feeling like you need some new ones, you might check out some of these resources. So again, Julianne Till from Southeast, she shared Teresa Wills. Her website has a whole bunch of templates of graphic organizers. Anyone who's already using Canva, I have an article here about how to create your own graphic organizers on Canva. Curriculum Coordinators takes you just to a PDF of tons of graphic organizers. HMH is Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt, and they have some templates. I mean, I feel like most teachers are not hurting for graphic organizers, but if you want to check out some new ones, you might explore those resources.
Hey, Rob, another thing with graphic organizers is even your newest English learners can use them, and you can partially fill them out for them so that they just have to supply 1 or 2 words that they have to listen to. So don't think you can't use them until they've gained some language. You can use them right away with them and just scaffold it more for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like great differentiation idea, right? So I have partially completed graphic organizer with images for like my newcomer. I have maybe my standard graphic organizer for my intermediate, and maybe my higher achieving kids are going to just write it out in paragraph form and don't need the graphic organizer at all. So good idea. A strategy shared in the book for step 5 is something called point and talk. Really easy, mostly having a visual representation of the concept you're teaching and then referring to that image as you teach. So this particular example is like, as we go through the plot of the story, we're maybe pointing on that graphic where we are. So, we're still introducing character and setting. So we're kind of in the beginning of the story. We're starting to get a problem. So we got some conflict going on. So we're right here. So kind of as we get to different pieces, we can refer to where on the graphic we are. Even if it's not something like this, that's a graphic of like a process or a sequence, even if you're having vocabulary terms. So if you have, hey, these are 5 vocabulary terms I'm going to be using a lot today, and I have images for them, then every time I say these particular words, I'm going to be pointing to that image. So when I'm saying executive branch, I'm pointing to that picture of the president and the White House and the executive branch. And when I'm talking about Congress, I'm talking about the Senate and the House of Representatives, and I'm pointing to those pictures. So just kind of words you're going to be saying, as I say them, I'm referring to that image. I'm touching that image to let kind of remind my students of where we are and what these words mean. So this is all about, for the EL teachers out there, this is all about providing comprehensible input. So really helping kids connect some meaning with the input they're receiving. As far as the number of vocabulary words, as you see here in our book, it's talking about doing at least 2 vocabulary words each lesson. Another sort of researcher, Beck and McCown, are pretty well known for their work on vocabulary. And they're talking about doing 3 to 5 words for each reading selection. I think the important thing is just not to do a long list. So If you're thinking, I'm going to pre-teach 10 vocabulary words, that's way too much. It's too time consuming. Kids are not going to remember that much. So really kind of narrowing it down to what are my three really important words I need kids to understand in this lesson, and then explicitly teaching those words.
And if you have 10 words, you can do 3 like the beginning of the week, then add 3 in the middle of the week, and then add 3 more at the end of the week. You're just not teaching all 10 at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Going through all 10 is not going to be a good use of your time. And I agree, kind of chunking it up into each day, doing 2 or 3. Developing a routine is important. The book talks about Marzano's 6-step routine. There's one by Margarita Calderon called a 7-step routine. It's very similar. It includes the translation into the home language. These are other things you might do in your routine. I think non-negotiable, you want a visual that's going with your vocabulary word. You probably want a student-friendly definition. You probably want the word used in a sentence. But then there's other things. You might do antonyms. You might do gestures. Cami this morning was talking about TPR, having sort of a physical motion for each word. Whatever your kids are responding to the best, whatever you think is really going to help them remember the words is what you should try to implement. I'm not going to tell you one routine's better than another, but picking 3 words, figuring out how do I want to explicitly teach the meaning of this word, making sure I have an image, and then making sure that's happening, right? Going into another strategy that was shared in the book, this is called scanning. I've never done this as a teacher, but it sounded interesting. So mostly it involves anytime we have a passage, encouraging kids to maybe starting at the bottom and just kind of scanning through the text as they go up, trying to pick out any words that they don't immediately recognize. So anything that was a little bit difficult for them to decode, or the meaning of that word didn't immediately pop in their head, and then kind of calling those out to the teacher and having the teacher sort of define those for them before starting the lesson. So trying to narrowing it down to just a few words, providing a student-friendly definition, providing a definition that makes sense for the lesson you're about to teach. And again, like it might be that you have kids that have tons of words that they come up with. It might be kind of a struggle to get them to give you a couple words, and you just want to be like, hey, really anything that you think is going to be an important word for this lesson, let's call it out and let's be really clear about what it means. The idea of starting at the bottom and going to the top is that basically we naturally want to read the whole text, and we're kind of trying to say, hey, don't spend the whole time reading the text. Let's just try to identify any words that are popping out right away. So that would be scanning. If you like my guy with X-ray vision, I got that from Flat Icon. So there you go. All right. And then kind of closing it up, they talk about using sentence frames, using sentence starters. Again, kind of saying vocabulary are bricks, and we need to learn how do we stick our bricks together. So we need students to have practice not only learning the meaning of a word, but being familiar with how do I use this word in a sentence, right? So what's a common way of using this in a sentence? Finding out what are the different parts of speech. How do I show this in the past tense? How do I show this in the present progressive? So kind of being able to use different variations of a vocabulary word. And sentence stems are a good way of kind of embedding that grammar instruction. I'm wondering, I don't know who wants to call it. Does anyone have any experience using a strategy like scanning or do something similar with their students? Anybody have sort of a routine for teaching vocabulary that they like a lot? I'd love to have anyone unmute if you feel up to it.
Okay. One thing that my students love to use is the Freire models for the vocabulary, especially when they're learning new content vocabulary. Mm-hmm. And when you got a kid asking, can they do another Freire model? I mean, You
Good.
won right there.
That's good. That's good.
Definitely won. And it's something easy. You don't need a copy. They create their own. It's very authentic and they love it. So I've been
Awesome.
using me and my partner, Miss Ward, we've been using Frere models for years and the kids really like it. So
Great. Thank you. Is it Cardelia or Cardelia?
Cordelia.
Cardelia. Thank you. I think I remember you from last session. So yeah, Frere model. If you're not familiar, it's kind of like a four corner sort of setup. You write your word in the middle. You're going to give like a definition, a drawing, maybe a non-example, maybe using in a sentence. There's kind of different variations of it, but yeah, that's a good way of having kind of a routine of kind of digging deeper with a word, and kids can enjoy it, right? So it's enjoyable to kind of how would you draw this? How would you draw this word, right? Thank you for sharing that out. That was great.
Cordelia, do you know the way to make them without having to print them? We used them all the time too. So you take your paper like this and fold it in fourths, and then in the very folded corner here, fold it down. And then when you unfold it, you have your four sections and you put your word in the middle. It has a
You
little
have a little
triangle
box
there.
in the middle
Oh,
there.
Yeah,
that's
so you
good. I
don't even
like
have to
that.
print anything on your paper. You just have them
Right.
fold it 4 times, fold
Right.
the corner, and then when you unfold it, you have your boxes and it has a center section for your word already. It's kind of hard to see on my screen here.
I see it. That's good because a lot
Yeah.
of kids get frustrated because their center circle is kind of crooked. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
I like that. Okay. That's a
Yeah.
good idea to add to it. I like that.
Good deal. All right, well, I think to wrap us up, I think if I would love it if you guys might want to write this in the chat. So what about today? It could be about step 5, about using more visuals, about developing a routine for teaching vocabulary. Maybe you want to try the point and talk strategy. Maybe you want to try the scanning. Maybe you want to try Frere model, or maybe it's one of the steps 1 through 4 that you just want to maybe you haven't fully implemented, or you want to give it another shot, or you have a different variation of it you want to try.
Something you heard in the breakout room.
Yeah, that'd be great. So if you'll take a second and just write out this sentence in the chat, that'll be sort of our closing exit ticket here. So my next step to implementing language rich strategies is blank. Oh, Amelia's fast.
She was ready.
To create sentence stems prior to my lessons for students to use during partner discussions. Awesome. A new vocabulary routine before our American Revolution reading projects. Love it, Abby. Good job. Use more randomized activities. Cardelia. More systematic with structures to use routinely. More visuals with my vocabulary. She tends to want a list of words, right? Cool. Sydney's reminded about the Frere model, wants to do that more. Cool. Use point and talk. Cool. Good. You guys are great. Awesome. Thanks for participating today. Yeah, I think one close, if you kind of see what we did here with this sort of sentence frame at the end of our lesson, I think that's a pretty solid practice too, is just, I was telling the group this morning, like, as a language objective, I used to be big on language objectives. I'm still am sort of, but I want to simplify it. And I kind of think if I have a learning target, my language objective could just be like, by the end of the lesson, I really want you to be able to finish this sentence, right? So the 3 branches of government are blank, blank, and blank, or, whatever it is. The first step to adding fractions is blank. So kind of starting that lesson with, we're going to be learning about this. By the end of our lesson, we're going to be able to do this sentence. And then as we get to the end of the lesson, coming back and like, all right, guys, think about how you finish that sentence. Then you might do a share with a partner. And then you might say, okay, let's have a random call out. Who can share with us, what are the 3 branches of government, and use their complete sentence. So great. All right. Well, mostly I just want to say thank you guys for hanging out this afternoon. I hope you're enjoying the book. I think it's great, super practical, easy to read. Um, and I'm in the St. Louis area. Guadalupe's in Kansas City. Rhea's in the Columbia area. Rhonda's in Springfield, Missouri area. Julie's in Southeast Missouri. And Cammie is our fearless leader in Jefferson City. So definitely email us if you have any questions or you want some support. And I look forward to seeing you on a class visit or at the next session.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Everyone stay safe, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
See ya.